I would like to start by thanking Eric for getting everybody awake, alert, and entertained, and James for scheduling me right after him. That was really nice of him. So on that note, courtesy laughter is not only acceptable, it's encouraged. My name is Chase McDonald. I work with Eric. I'm an assistant regional engineer in the Utah Lake Jordan River office. I'm working on my PE. I'm not a PE teacher, but I'm going to do my best to be a teacher today. So we are going to talk about water shares versus water rights. What's the difference? Is there a difference? So to start, you've all heard a thing or two about water rights so far today, I hope. They are considered real property in the state of Utah, created within Title 73 of the Utah Code, which includes applications to appropriate, decrees, diligence claims, underground water claims, things of that nature. Water rights are owned by either individuals or entities, cities, irrigation companies, and they are pertinent to the land if there is a unity in title. So that means the ownership of the water right transfers with the land unless it's severed. And to do that, it's basically you need to reserve it in a deed. The county recorder is the office of record of ownership for perfected water rights. So I have a little house up there, and that is a very, very loose comparison, basically saying the house is attached to the ground, kind of like a water right is pertinent to the land. My grandpa loves to tell a story about, he grew up in Talmadge, Utah. If anybody knows where that is, I'd be impressed. But they had a couple houses, a couple buildings they needed to move, and the smaller ones they put on logs and rolled them wherever they needed to. My grandpa loves to talk about how my great-grandfather had to cut one of the houses in half, put skids on it, drag it with a team, and he just loves to tell that story because it was one of the only times he heard my great-grandfather curse and kick dirt and get all upset. So the point of that is you can sever a water right from the land, but you're going to have to work for it. No, it's not that difficult, but I hope that kind of illustrates the point a little bit. So water shares, the difference is the company owns the shares, and then shareholders purchase stock from those companies. So the whole interest of the company is divided into equal shares and sold to the shareholders, like I already said. It entitles, the shares entitle a shareholder to use a proportionate share of that water right or water rights within the limits of the company's right. They are not appurtenant to the land, and the ownership transfers not by pertinence, but by reissuing share certificates in the new owner's name. But the company still owns the property. I have a little RV there to show that it's not connected to the land. You can think of it, my original analogy was you can think of it as a company that owns a bunch of RVs. You can rent that RV. But let's think of it like a sliced loaf of bread, where the company owns the loaf of bread. You can buy a slice and use that slice. So, well, going back real quick, let me not get ahead of myself. So, we talked about that. So to kind of clarify something Eric said about supplemental groups, so you have a group of rights that are supplemental, and that we have that little comment saying that in this group, water shares, or it's supplemental with rights from an irrigation company. That would be like if somebody owns a share in that company and they have their own water right, they use them together, that's where that comment would come into play. And so let's say you own a share, but you want to use it outside of what the company's rights are approved for. You can file a change application on water shares. And it's kind of you can think of it as a 3-part process, and we'll go through what that is next. So the first part is on the applicant. The applicant needs to put together the change application. They need to deliver the proposed change application to the company. So before they come to us, well, we can help put that proposed change application together, but it needs to go to the company before it's officially submitted with us. When that proposed application goes to the company, it needs to be personal delivery with a signed receipt, or certified mail, or electronic mail with a confirmation of receipt. So essentially, you just need to get proof that it was given to the company. And I apologize, before you can propose a change application, you need what's called a share statement. So you take your issued stock certificate from the company, give it to us, and we will essentially create a water right jacket that's used for that share, and then use that share statement. You file a change application on that share statement. Does that make sense?
Can I give one clarification?
Please do.
You don't give the share to us, you just show it to us.
Right.
Okay.
We need a copy of it.
We put a copy on the file.
Right.
You still own the share.
Yeah. That's a great clarification, actually. Thank you. That'll save me some phone calls. Yeah, please.
So if a company has water rights 1 through 10, and they sell a bunch of shares, and you want to take one of those shares and do a change application, and you guys assign a water right to that change application or to that share, does that mean one of the underlying water rights 1 through 10 has that amount now segregated from those underlying rights, or does that water right now have 2 water right numbers?
So I'll get to that later. It's not, I don't know if it's technically segregated, but that the underlying right that the water company owns will be reduced by the amount of the share statement.
Chase, can I help? Because we probably ought to address this right now.
Okay.
So it does not affect the rights of the company. They use all their sources to serve their shareholders, and each of them gets a proportionate share of their water rights. Your proportionate part of those uses stop when you file a change to take it somewhere else, but we're not segregating their rights in creating a shareholder seg. We're just creating a new file jacket to represent your shares.
Right. So does that make sense? And that's what I'll cover later in the change application process. Yeah.
What about depletion? What about depletion in situations like this? Because you're depleting the company's right.
So with depletion, you said they're depleting the company's right, but we use the word depletion a little bit differently. So they're not depleting the company's right. They're buying a portion of it, and then the only way the underlying right will be reduced is if they file a change application to move it somewhere else. Does that answer your question?
Earlier when we talked, you can't do anything without the permission of the company, isn't that correct? Because it's really their water right, and you own a share in them. So if they say no, if they say no, you're not going to be able to do it. Is that my understanding? Kind
of. Yes and no, not entirely. I'll get to that as well. So you need to work with the company, but I'll get there, I promise.
Well, you just said again that if a change of application goes through, like one shareholder sells it to somebody else out of the delivery service area, it reduces the water rights of the company. Is that right? Or no, it just changes shareholders, doesn't it?
Ask that again, please.
I mean, you said it would reduce the water rights of the company if a change of application took place and one shareholder sold it. Like we had a shareholder sell 20 shares to Nibley City, but Nibley City, I mean, it didn't reduce our water rights. Now Nibley City pays us an assessment fee for those water shares.
And that's true. It doesn't reduce the underlying water right, as in you can't use that water. It just says it's being used somewhere else.
Right, it didn't transfer the rights to Nibley City.
No, it didn't transfer the rights.
Okay.
You got a share statement.
Okay.
And that's what I guess I'm failing to get across is share statements are ownership in the original underlying right. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Any more questions? I think hopefully when I get through this next part, it'll clarify a lot. Or you guys will have a lot more questions and I'll need Boyd to help me out again, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So to reiterate, water rights are owned by the company. You get stock in that company. So you get a stock certificate saying I own shares in this company, and you can file what's called a share statement with us saying, basically demonstrating, proving, hey, I own this many shares in this company. We will create a water right file jacket. So it doesn't become a water right. It's just a file jacket acknowledging that you own this much share in this company that's good for this much water. And then you can, at that point, file a change application on that share statement. Is that clear? Okay. So at that point, if you give us a copy of a share stock certificate, get a share statement issued, then you can file a change application. And as I said, we can help you put those change applications together. You need to submit that change application to the company, and the company will look it over. And as I said, when you submit it to the company, you need proof that you submitted it to them. That'll come up later. And then additionally,
So
question.
I think this gentleman asked about depletion, but if you change the use of that water over to a city, if it was used to irrigate, then what was the number, 50%? And now when you're changing this over as a shareholder and giving it to a city, that depletion rate is perhaps different because it's used for domestic. Does that mean that the irrigation company lost a certain CFS or whatever because of the depletion?
So when we evaluate change applications, once that change application is approved and certificated, it could reduce the underlying right. Am I saying that correctly?
Not on a share change.
Not on a share change. Okay.
It may reduce what they can deliver to the other shareholders under their rights, because they no longer are delivering to that shareholder, and so they're not entitled to divert water because it's being diverted from another source. But you're not altering the company's rights.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys training me today. This is great. No, I apologize for the confusion. And thank you, Boyd. And thank you for the questions. Please keep them coming if I'm being unclear in any way or inaccurate. And so with the proposed change application, they need to include the certificate number of the stock, description of the land proposed to be retired from irrigation. That's only if there is irrigation, and it's not required, but one of the easy ways to describe that land is with a heretofore map saying this is where it's been irrigated. And then an agreement by the shareholder to continue to pay all applicable corporate assessments on the share check affected by the change. And then, as it says, any information the water company may reasonably need to propose or to evaluate the proposed change application. So basically, whatever information that the irrigation company may need to either back or sorry, either consent or decline consent of that change application.
Point of clarification.
Hold on 1 second.
Does the shareholder continue to pay?
Corporate.
Just clarification, it says the agreement by the shareholder to continue to pay all applicable corporate assessments on the share affected by the change. Does that mean you continue to pay for your assessment to an irrigation company even after you've sold that water right?
Okay, so
Or changed.
it's,
Or is it just a
it's
change?
not a water right, it's a share.
Right, but you
So
sold a share.
as long as, because that, and maybe I shouldn't have said it the way I said it, the share statement is still just a share in that company. So even if you get a share statement and file a change application on that, it's still based on the company's shares. So yes, you still pay an assessment because it's still based on their water.
Oh, the new shareholder will continue to pay.
If you sell it, the new shareholder will pay that assessment.
So what if all of the shares in the company were sold off to many different individuals and they all converted them into municipal use? Would they still be paying the irrigation company? Or would that irrigation company be dissolved at that point? And when would that happen? I don't know, that's complicated, sorry.
It is. So you're saying everybody sells their shares?
Converting it into municipal use into their well, and now we're using it for indoor use, and it's still being billed out as irrigation. I don't understand that.
So that, I believe that would go through the company. That's, we don't deal with the assessments.
Okay, so the irrigation company's still collecting all this money from the municipality, even though it's not being used for irrigation purposes.
Hey, Chase, can I help with that
Potentially.
one?
Yeah.
Let me help with that. Just extremes, okay? Willa, just for a second here. Sorry, no, yeah. Anyway, if a city came into ownership of all of the shares of an irrigation company, then guess who runs the irrigation company? The city. They own all the shares. So anything that happens within that company would be voted by the shareholders, which is the city. So that's an extreme example, and I know you're not quite there as far as you only own 75% of the shares, I think is kind of what you're asking, but you are the majority shareholder, and your vote carries a lot of weight at those meetings, and so you kind of control the company at that point. But one more point of clarification, 9 times out of 10, when a shareholder wants to do a change application and move his share into the city because the city required it for a development, that share statement that Chase was talking about, the water right file jacket, would then become, the owner of that water right file jacket would be the city. And so you own it, not the person, not the city owns that, not the shareholder that had to give it to you in order to do their development.
Okay. So once the proposed change application is delivered to the company, part 2, in my mind, of this process is the company needs to look at it and respond. And so until a couple of years ago, there was no required amount of time to wait. So essentially, if you submitted your proposed change application, the company could seemingly kind of sit on it for a very long time, in which you might end up looking like that poor person right there. A couple years ago, we changed that, so that's not the case. So if anybody was wondering, what if I submit an application, I never hear back? We thought of that. And so they have 120 days to respond. They can either consent with certain conditions, or decline, but they need to state their reasons. And then if they don't respond within 120 days, like I said, we deem that consent, and that's where the confirmation of receipt comes in. So you'll submit that to us saying, I delivered this to them, it's been 120 days, they haven't responded, and then we can move on with that change application. So when the company has it, there's quite a few things they need to consider, whether it's going to increase their costs, interfere with their management or distribution of water to other users. They need to check the volumes of what the shareholder put in that change and make sure that it's lines up with what their share's worth. And then obviously they can't give preferential access that impairs others in quantity or quality, and then they need to consider if they need any carrier water conditions on there. Furthermore, they obviously need to make sure it doesn't violate any statute, and they need to look at what the applicant proposed to retire and see if it is irrigation, they need to look at what the applicant proposed to retire and see if that's acceptable or any of the above. So like I said, they can't withhold consent, and then, you know, if they disagree with the change, they need to try to mitigate it if it's reasonable. They can make the shareholder pay some kind of cost. If nothing else, if they can't come to terms, it could go to litigation. After the company has it and either consents, declines, or has it for 120 days, the onus goes back to the applicant, who will file the change application with us. And it needs to include either the company's consent, their terms, or a court order. And if they take that 120 days, we need an affidavit signed by the shareholder with the proof of receipt. And then once that change application is approved, the applicant can submit extensions of time to submit proof without involving the company. Then it's their change application, they can keep extending.
Question. If shares have a water right jacket and can be moved out of a company and used somewhere else, and this does not change the water right amount of the company, isn't that enlarging the company's water right?
So moving outside of a service area, I would say no. Ross?
Well, I'll try to chime in here. If a share creates a water right jacket, okay, and that share on that water right jacket has a change application that moves that share out of the irrigation company's service area, we will be placing a condition on the approval of a change application that says that a proportionate amount of beneficial use, usually irrigation, would need to be retired within the service area of the irrigation company. And that is how we do not cause an enlargement of the water right. Did that make sense?
Did that make sense to everybody in here? Okay. And then I've included on this second to last slide just a few questions to consider while you're studying. And I'll open it up to any other questions. I hope that I've clarified more than confused. Are there any others? No? Okay, and as Eric said, if you run into any other issues, as you're practicing, if you have any water right issues or need clarification, you can always contact our office. We're more than happy to help out, and if we don't know the answers right away, we'll do whatever we have to do to find them. So if there are no more questions, then thank you for your patience.
Can I ask one, if no one else has one? The whole purpose of talking about shares is to understand there's a difference between a share and a water right. So when you come to talk to us, what will happen and what you're entitled to are two different things, depending on whether you own a share or a water right. So it's important that you know what you're talking about when you come talk to us.